Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today. It's a beautiful day, this day in April of 2024. We are so excited, as usual, to bring people to you, ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things in this world. The channel focuses on bringing you ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things for us to learn, relearn, and unlearn from each other. We have gone throughout the continents, we have gone through different parts of the world, and today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to bring a brother, Zim. If you
Yeah.
don't know what Zim is, you will understand as we go through this uh, conversation. I have so many brothers from Zim, the chairperson of the board of Nyaka. I don't think my friend knows this, is a brother from Zim. The treasurer of Nyaka organization is a brother from Zim. I didn't
Really?
tell you. I wanted you to get that that surprise.
Yeah.
Brothers right here in Michigan, where I'm recording from today. When I hit Harvard last year, the entire year was surrounded by Zim brothers. The continent Pan-Africanism has really surrounded me. The other fact that many people do not understand and know is I've been to every single African country. So I've been to your country.
Wow.
My brother, thank you for joining us. Thank you for making time. You are a busy man. This is a brother, a man who is going to share so much of what many of us aspire to do.
Mm.
Published author, lived right here in Michigan with us and now lives in Toledo. There's something going on, ladies and gentlemen, in Toledo today because we are recording this on Monday 8th.
Hmm.
Monday, April 8th, 2024. The eclipse is coming in a few hours from today. We
Mm.
might bring you this recording in another time, but I want you to remember this is the day when the eclipse is happening. It will happen again in 30 years. So,
Uh,
what a special occasion. My brother, Shingi Mavima, let me give it good credit. Dr. Shingi Mavima, thank you for making time, my brother. Welcome
oh,
to TJK channel, TJK shares. We give knowledge for free so others can also aspire and be inspired to do great things in the world. Thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself and tell.
thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So first of all, let me just start by thanking you for a wonderful platform, right? This is like you're saying, we're learning so much just by watching the interviews you do here. As if you're the example that you had set for us already before I even knew you at this channel has not been amazing enough. So yeah, got a couple of your books up here, that I've really enjoyed, from which I've benefited. Uh yes, the name is Shingi Mavima. Born and raised in Zim, right, Zimbabwe. Yeah, I
Uh,
was I was actually born in Harare, but I grew up in Mutare, so that's the city very close to my heart. Mutare, for those who know, borders Mozambique, on the east side of Zimbabwe. So we're right there. Um, yeah. So I grew up there, and in fact, I don't have that particular book here. I thought I did, but I detail a lot of my childhood in Mutare in a book called Pashena, which is my first sort of novel. It's largely autobiographical, but you know, it's essentially a novel. Um, Came out a few years ago, but that's Pashena. We'll get to, yeah, but grew up in Mutare, man, was raised largely by my maternal grandparents,
yeah,
right? So, Gogo and Kulu, as we called them, my true loves, my darlings. My mom she was in and out, but she was in college and things like that. But I grew up in the household with my grandparents. And if African communities, but I would even say I've seen the same in other communities as well, even here where the grandparents' house, the grandparents end up raising a lot of us. So
yes. Mhm.
So even though I was I'm an only child by my mom, I have my siblings on my dad's side who I love and I'll talk about. But as an only child on my mom's side, since that's who I was growing with, it never felt that way just because at any point in time, we lived with like 4 or 5 other cousins. So yeah, so I grew up in Mutare, Rangamvura Mutare, which actually I'm rocking the Rangamvura United shirt right now.
Yeah.
That's because that's one of the things that I do to give back to the community. I'm on that executive board for our local soccer team, and we help fund some things and things like that. So we have a good time with that. Went to Sydney Primary School, started to develop my passions while I was there. I really like and love soccer, right? Football.
Yeah.
Uh, though I was never that good though, but if you are nice enough, if you get along well with people and you have some leadership, there's always a space for you somewhere. So I would organize little things like, hey, let's organize some of the matches, I guess. And that always earned me a place on teams because people don't really like to do that. So that was one. But the other passion I developed early on that is two other passions. I realized pretty early on that I was pretty good in school. So at that point, I'm so glad I had people who encouraged me in that way. So I took school seriously. But going along with that, I really started to develop a passion for writing as well. There were two uncles in my household that are largely responsible for this. One of them was a Shona teacher, and Shona is the native language I speak. Was a Shona teacher in high school. The other one was an English teacher in high school. So by the time I was in third and fourth grade, the books that they taught were strewn all over the house, and I would read whatever I could get my hands on. So when I say things like things fall apart and the works of Ngugi and so forth, by the time I was in fourth and fifth grade, I had read those. Same thing with the Shona book, the likes of Feso, Kukurukura, Ungewa Potsquare, and so forth. So I got really into this very early on, and that just kind of continued. I moved to Harare for high school, St. George's College, shout out. Then, really got into more writing while I was there. Then eventually came to the USA for university. My dad at that time had already moved to the US with my siblings by him, right? With essentially my half siblings.
Yeah.
They were already set up over here in the early 2000s. So when I came for college, I just kind of moved in with them in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is what essentially where our family home in the US is now. I got
Yes.
my undergrad in international relations, master's in international affairs, before getting my PhD in African American and African studies, right? Largely considered Black studies, because I say Black studies because depending on the university, they call it something slightly different. It might be Africology, might be
That's true.
Africana Studies. Yeah, so, but the universal name for it is Black Studies. And now I've moved to Toledo. Also, yeah, that part, I got my PhD in Michigan State University, which
Go
is where
Spartans, go green.
the Spartans go green, go white.
That's right.
Indeed. Yeah. Which essentially is the place that brought me together with Jackson, that you know, where we started to share some of the work that we do. And it's essentially the path that led me here. And now I teach history at the University of Toledo, focusing largely on African history, but world history at large, indeed. So that's me in a nutshell, indeed.
Wow, wow, wow. Now I'm going to bring it from the top because you mentioned the soccer. That's how we got to read it together.
Mm, hmm.
And in this community where I have lived for 21, 22 years now, uh,
Yeah.
where before you moved here,
Mm,
the Caribas of
mm.
Pero at
Yeah,
Michigan State,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
one of your mentors, and now
Hmm.
VP, has become a vice president at Michigan State University. So
Uh,
you mentioned the soccer. I want to go back. As a child, I played football. We called it
mm,
soccer in the United States.
mhm.
And I was never good. I know Norman, who is a good friend.
Yeah.
You know the Daniels, these young people who run on the field and non-stop. I was
Yeah.
a soccer player, but I've stayed with the game. Number one, it connects me with people from all over the world. Number
Hmm.
two, I get to do some exercise. Number
Yeah.
three, I need my mentor. That's the only place when I am either running or playing on the field that I don't have to worry about which book I have to write now, what
Mhm.
meeting do I need to go to. So that passion that continues to be now on your chest, even on your shirt. If we had coordinated, I would have worn my Uganda Cranes soccer.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Shingi, for somebody who is sitting there now,
Hmm.
their mom had them, their mom is not married, and
Hmm.
they are being raised by a grandmother.
Hmm.
And you mentioned that, and my heart went, oh my goodness. I
Hmm.
love these interviews because they bring something that people actually don't know. I know
Hmm.
you were raised by your grandmother.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
working with 23,000 grandmothers who are raising 92,000 children. So there
Mm,
are 92,000 Shingis right now in
absolutely.
southwestern Uganda, just one part, who will listen to this and say, I can do it because Shingi did it. Talk
Mm.
about your mom a little bit, and then
Yeah.
about your
That
grandmother
that
before you come to Grand Rapids. What type of woman are we talking about? What a
uh
courageous woman to raise such an amazing doctor.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, in my life, I can talk prominently early on, I also want to make sure, let me just do this right away to that just I also want to shout out to my mom in the US, who's my stepmom.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much, mom, for everything since I got here. I know a lot of people have horror stories about the stepmom situation, but she's been she's my mom for real, so I really want to shout her out as well.
I was coming to that, but thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I also want to talk about the two maternal figures in my life, the prominent ones, my grandma. So like I mentioned, my grandma. Oh yeah, in fact, I don't actually have the actual picture, but in one of the first books that I that I was trying to publish, it is a poetry anthology back from 2010 or 11 or something like that. You can't quite see it here because the person did a silhouette of it, which was the design. But this
Yeah.
is a picture of me and my grandma. I have it all over the house when I was in fourth grade, and that's the
Uh,
first when I think that's the first time I won. I think I'd come first on the end of year exams or something like that. So I
yes.
was getting an award here, and she's leaning over my shoulder here as I'm lifting my award. So my grandma, man, she passed away in 99. So just as I was about to leave for high school, you know what I'm saying? But what a darling woman. Yeah, I can't, I've recorded songs that are dedicated to her that are available. And we can talk about that later too.
We
That's
give her a big hug.
Yeah, that's my girl, man. Then my mom, like I said, she had me while she was in college, but she went on to really advance herself, so you know around when I was in fifth grade, she had come to Canada where she got her master's, came back, and we lived together. After my grandma had passed on and I'd moved to Harare, it was just me and my mom for the next 6 or so years. Um, at which point, when I left for college, around the time she also left to go get her PhD. So in Australia. So now my mom also, who I fondly refer to as the good doctor, sees one other person who ended up being modeling behavior. You know what I'm saying? Like that's who my dad as well ended up, my dad as well got in his PhD. But if you remember, he wasn't, like I said, I didn't live with him when I grew up. So the inspirational figure for me that I knew on a day-to-day basis was my mom. So that's in whose footsteps I followed, even though I'm inspired by both of them. So very strong woman. She's now, she's based in Australia now, where she's been working since she got her PhD. Um, yeah, but we are very, very close. In fact, every single book that I've written, Definitely my dissertation and the two and Pashena, the one I was talking about earlier, and
Yes.
the in both all those she edits them, right? But other people edit them as well. But with her, it comes to the level of it's just the level below core writer, so to speak. She's so hands-on, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't, every project that I do passes through her hands, and yeah, so yeah, that's mom, man. I can't speak enough about her and what she means to me, and the work that I do indeed.
Very, very good. So let me add my voice on yours and thank
Mhm.
your good doctor, mama, biological, the one who birthed you. Thank your grandmother, uh, and thank your father who fathered you. Many people will reject their children. We know so many people to this day
Mhm.
who whose children will tell you never.
Mhm.
But for him to have come in and got you to come here, and then your mama in Grand Rapids, we
Mhm.
thank you, and your siblings, we thank you. You are a combination of all these different parts, molecules that make the man we are talking to today. Ladies and
Absolutely.
gentlemen, for those of you who like to Google and find more things about other people, let me just put on my glasses and read something here. Shingi Mavima, doctor, is a poet, a writer, hailing from Zimbabwe and currently residing in Toledo, Ohio. Dr. Mavima has published two poetry collections, Homeward Bound, Mileage of Days of Old, as well as one autobiographical novel, Ashena. When he's not writing creative, Ray Mavima is an assistant professor of history at University of Toledo. He specializes in contemporary Southern African history with a focus on colonial and post-colonial periods, with additional scholarly interest in African literature and popular culture. That is from the book, The Leak.
Mhm.
Now we find out how he was born. We know where he was raised. We know he's a Spartan. He got his PhD at Spartan, uh,
Mhm.
Michigan State University. And the question I was going to ask you following was how the people you grew up with influenced you, and you answered it before we asked that question. So
Mhm.
now let's talk about people grow, they get education, they pursue different um, journeys, different passions. You could have been a soccer coach, you didn't. What
Mhm.
inspired you to pursue your academic journey, particularly focusing on African studies and literature? That's why I read that little thing.
Yeah.
Why did you choose African studies and literature?
Ooh, so that's a very good question, right? Because I think a lot of people assume, even when I tell people that I teach, I focus on African history here, they assume like, oh yeah, because he's African, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, like we know a lot of people don't care. A lot of Africans don't actually care about, like people anyway. I'm not saying just that's not unique to Africans. A lot of Americans don't care about American, you know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
it's not a given that because you are that. In fact, when I came here and I started to get into when I came here, I was studying international relations because my goal, I always saw myself being a some sort of diplomat, you know what I'm saying? Maybe even getting into that political space, which again, maybe that ship is not sailed, even though it's becoming less and less attractive.
Mm.
But but at the time, I was so sure that's what I was gonna do. So in my getting my international relations class, sort of degree at Grand Valley, a lot of the electives I took were Africa related. Then I built some relationships with professors in that space.
Mm.
And soon I found that I was maybe 3 credits away from getting a minor in African American and African studies. Let's just do that. So,
Yes.
so so that part is almost accidental. But this is not to say that I wasn't interested prior to that. In fact, I was part of the group. that founded the African Students Council at Grand Valley, as a younger bro, some of the older brothers were in charge of but I was part of that founding group, if that makes sense.
Wow.
But eventually I would go on to be president of that as well. So I'm saying like my passions were constantly getting ignited here. Then after I'd come back from my master's at Penn State, I I worked in refugee services for
Mm.
for just under 2 years in Grand Rapids. And in that space, I had such a transcendent experience working with different, again, that Pan-Africanism we were talking about, working with, a lot of folks from places like the Sudan, Somalia, the Congo. This is where a lot of the refugee people from other parts of the world as well, like Myanmar. But I'm saying that the African ones are the ones that so there's that, but even also noticing something that we notice a lot of early on, which is like maybe relationships between Africans from the continent and in the diaspora, like, African Americans or Caribbeans, some of those uneases and tensions,
Mm.
seeing how the kids would react sometimes to their black mentors, and so the resistance early on, then eventually being very tight with them, you know what I'm saying, after they got over that hump and started to think like, why are these things happening, right? What is going on here? And while I was there, I shot my shot, as people say, with a PhD application to MSU. And I'll tell you, man, this is funny right here, that one of the things that made me feel I was just applying because, I'd heard good things about the program. It was also nearer to where I was. But one of the things that made convince me I was supposed is I was looking at the list of languages that you needed, right, to get your thing eventually. And Shona was one of them. And I've never seen Shona on a list like that outside of Zimbabwe. I was like, okay, I'm applying to this. Turns out, though, turns out that they didn't actually have it. So it's almost like the sign was just to encourage me to apply for it. You know what I mean? Because after I applied, and I was like, okay, what about that Shona? I was like, oh yeah, no, we don't actually have that anymore. I was like, so you kept it long enough
From
just as my sign to apply here. You know what I mean? So then I ended up here. I ended up at Michigan State, sorry. And yeah, we mentioned one of my mentors, Pero, but shout out to Dr. Idozi, and other mentors I had, as well as my peers, my colleagues within the Black Studies program, but other people that I met as well. For the motivation, man. Once I was in the space, I knew it felt right. You know what I'm saying? Even when it wasn't easy, but it was right, if that makes sense, and to this day, I still, I'm still very much in love with all that. When I get into teaching class here, like I always say this, that I could be having a very tough time as life tends to happen. But for 1 hour, 20 minutes each time when I'm in front of a classroom, I'm in heaven. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing else matters. And it's a blessing to have a job like that. You know what I mean? Or to have endeavors like that make you feel that way. Indeed.
Perfect. Wow. So not only do you love what you do, you have passion for it, and it also connects you back home.
Indeed.
In your introduction, you did mention Shona as your language.
Mm-hmm.
I've had guests who speak Arabic, who speak French, who
Mm-hmm.
speak Spanish, who speak Portuguese. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say, when we are finishing, you're going to greet people, or you can do it now, greet people in Shona.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody can pick up the language. And we want our Shona listeners also to have the pride of connection to home.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh Let me actually do this because I also because like I was saying earlier, I make music as well. So I'm gonna do a few lines in greeting in Shona of a rap song.
Yes,
Where
do it.
ndapepuka mamba kwedza ndakaringa jenga chenga paya panosangana mitunhu namatenga uropi huchikakata kunzwisisa upenyu ndine zvinondinetsa pamwe zvirikowo kwenyu. So yeah, makadi henyu vadyi vesadza makorekore, mandau, mazezuru, manyika, wakaranga. Ndini wenyu Shingi Mavima. Ndofara kwazvo kutaura nemi nhasi. Murambe makashinga.
Wow. Wonderful. Trust me, we are going to pull that out and make it a short, which I'll make sure I share with my Zoom community, and then I will also make sure that this goes to them. They can see our connections, but also get inspired by the work you do.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Your work spans academia, literature, community service, uh, soccer. It's so diverse. You are so diverse in pursuits. I know your mom is teaching in Australia, your dad in Grand Rapids, your other mom is also in Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
Why is this? Why are you so diverse in so many different things rather than just focus on
That's
one?
a that's a very, very good question. Because a lot of times I don't actually see these things as being very different. I think like they are, instead of being separate trees, they're branches of the same one. Uh because say my passion is in, I love the community I grew up in, right? So that's the passion and motivator right there. So based on that, and the thing that I most associate with growing up in that place is soccer. So when I'm playing or when I'm engaging with that, I'm still engaging with that community. When I write my stories, like Pashena literally translates to the dirt field. It talks about the place where we would gather around to play soccer. So even in my literature, is that story. And the philanthropy, right? It's to give back to that community largely. So these aren't necessarily different things. It's different forms of expression,
Mm.
but also allowing ourselves to be, I think, historically, I don't know about historically per se, but I know at least in the earlier part of the modern era, where we got tied to whatever the job we do was, right? And then a lot of people would end up working that job and that job alone for the next 40, 45 years until they retired. Then, but you've lived in the same community the whole time, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I think we live in an era now where we can express our different passions. You don't have to say like, oh, I always wanted to be this other thing, but I never got to do it. We have the internet and spaces like this where we can be doing this thing where previously you'd have had to make a plan to have me come into the studio, which you have also set up and invested in a fancy studio, but now we can just do this, right? And keep it moving. So I say that allows us, this era we're in, that allows us to express ourselves in many different ways. So for example, that last night I was in the studio in Lansing, just drove up to Lansing in the studio, spent a couple hours recording some music,
Right.
came back, did my class prep. Now I'm doing this. Then we'll watch the eclipse later. Then I'll be in the gym after that. These are all things that in the past you couldn't get
Yes.
all this done. So I think people always wanted to do that, right? But life just didn't accord itself to that. Or people are afraid of that because and we have a mutual friend, King Isaac.
Yes.
Um, and me and him have this conversation a lot about sometimes when he switches genres or things like that. And we're like, King,
Yeah.
are you not afraid that this is going to take away from your legacy as a reggae artist when people hear you do this other, but we can't keep living our lives with these imagined barriers to things, right? Like give it a shot. If you wanna, if I put music out and people don't like it, that's fine, but I did it. I never wanna sit behind, live. I don't wanna be 80 years old or whatever, saying like, man, I could have done something with that.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so the passions I put them out, but I know a lot of people also feel the same way, but maybe just not confident enough, maybe just don't have the opportunity enough. And while I have it, and while I have the time, and while I have the energy, I just realized like I'm gonna go for it, right? And quickly dovetailing with the philanthropy, and I've read your books here, and you know, even when you talked about the grandmothers, that was one of my favorite parts of. I was like, "What is this real?" Because it came towards the end of the book, you know. I was like, "Oh." So, but I say that to say, even that I started that in 2012, so I would have been like 24, 23, 24. And a lot of the people I started with were even younger. I'd be
Yes.
like, when when is the time ever gonna be right? You know, because I can wait until I'm done with school, but at that point, maybe who knows? Maybe I'm getting married and I have kids. Now you feel like I've got to take care of this first. You know what I mean? Or maybe things just don't work out for me in that moment, and I no longer have the resources or the means that I have, you know. Whereas I could have started it, and if I fallen on tough times, somebody could take over it. Right. So it's like, yeah, now is the time. You know, we'll learn. I was like, all right, we're gonna start it. We'll learn as we go what we need to do. So we still, you know, so that's just kind of become my attitude, even with publishing. I'm like, yo, we're gonna put it out, we're gonna start writing, we'll see where this goes, you know. So indeed. Mhm.
That's a treatable moment, you know, that it is never going to be the right time
Mm,
to do something.
mm, mhm,
And with that, Dr. Mavima, we
mhm.
are going to end our part one of this.
Okay, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mavima is not going away. The eclipse is not yet up. It will
Mhm.
come in the next 3-4 hours. We will have him for an extra part two
Good,
on
good.
TJK Shares. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. To
Okay.
all our Zim brothers and sisters, here we are home. Share this to all our brothers all over the world and sisters. We continue to bring you Shima, Dr. Mavima Shingi in the next episode. Stay tuned. Don't go away.